Welcome to this third pod preparation video on where we're looking at Mark's Gospel. This particular video will look at how we can apply the main points of Mark in our Christian lives. Although discipleship is present throughout Mark's Gospel, the main section on discipleship comes in what we've referred to as the second act, that is, after Peter's confession that Jesus is the Christ, and while the disciples journey with Jesus to Jerusalem. That is chapters 8, the second part of that, through to the end of chapter 10. And this section contains Jesus' three clear predictions that he will be crucified in Jerusalem and then rise again. And the disciples don't understand what's going on. These are sandwiched by two stories where Jesus heals blind people. And there's a point here. Mark is using the stories to bring out the meaning of what's going on. And the stories are in chapter 8, 22, just before Peter's confession, and then at the very end, just before they arrive in Jerusalem. That is 10:46 onwards. The central passage is Mark chapter 8, 34 to the beginning of chapter 9. And this is really what we're looking at today. Those wishing to follow Jesus must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow him. The call to discipleship is the call to follow Jesus as Messiah, the Son of God, into a death like his and receive the benefits of his death and resurrection. In terms of application, these are probably the leading verses in Mark's Gospel, because they're central and they speak to the heart of discipleship. And the experience of the kingdom is promised in chapter 9, verse 1, to those who follow Jesus in this way. Now, Morna Hooker, who's a biblical scholar on Mark, has summed up self-denial in the following quotation. I think it's quite helpful. Self-denial is the opposite of self-affirmation, of putting value on one's being, one's life, one's position before man or God, of claiming rights and privileges. This history of Jesus effectively comes from the lips of Peter himself. As such, it is bound up with Peter's own love for Christ, and also his failure to follow him successfully, because when the test came, he denied Christ publicly. His denial is like a bleeding wound in the heart of this gospel. Mark himself failed Jesus and the apostles, Peter and Paul, and this no doubt explains the prominence of self-denial as the outworking of faith in the gospel of Mark. In one sense, Mark is writing Peter's account and saying, we both failed as we tried to follow Jesus, but we got up on our feet again, and through Jesus' help, in the end, we got there. So there's hope for everyone. Let me, in this last section, try and summarize what Mark's Gospel is about. First of all, it asks the question, who is Jesus? And answers it clearly. He is the Christ, the Messiah, the Anointed One, the one prophesied by Isaiah. What did he come to do? Well, he came to serve and to suffer and to die as a ransom. And what then does he ask of his disciples? He asks us to take up our cross and to follow him through death and self-denial into the glory of the kingdom and the resurrection. What from this gospel has made the biggest impression on you? That's the question to ask. Jesus said in Matthew's Gospel at a crucial point, therefore anyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house upon a rock. The key thing about this pod ministry is taking one thing away and putting it into practice. This is arguably the most important part, because if we don't do anything as a result, we simply build our lives upon the sand.